All right. Good evening, class. Hello, everybody. So this is a session regarding backend development. The week one session of backend development. We'll be discussing about server foundations, Node.js, and Express API architecture. I hope everyone is excited to be in this session. All right. So let's get started then. So let's take a brief look about what backend development means. So backend development refers to the server-side logic, database operations, and architecture that powers an application behind the scenes. So we know that the opposite of backend development is front-end development. While the front end handles what the users see and interact with, as the user interface, the backend manages business logic, data storage, user authentication, and system security. So core components of backend architecture involves servers. So let's delve on servers. Servers are machines or cloud environments. I know we understand that examples of cloud environments are AWS and Microsoft Azure, hosting the application code. Another core component of backend architecture is databases. Storage engines like PostgreSQL, MongoDB, or SQL Server that persist and query data. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Another core component of backend architecture is the application logic, server-side code, built in C Sharp, Python, Java, Node.js, that enforces rules, processes transactions, and computes operations. Looking at the Express API architecture, API stands for Application Programming Interface. It is a set of rules and protocols that allows two different software systems to communicate with each other. It acts as an intermediary messenger that takes a request from a client, tells the server what to do, and delivers the response back. I hope you understand this brief explanation of backend development and API architecture. So a standard API request response cycle, it involves when a data synchronization system requests, then you authenticate the request. After authenticating the request, you process the request and you allow for data exchange and response. So common API examples are payment processing platforms, e-commerce apps which using Stripe API to process credit card payments. We also have login services. Applications use O authentication APIs like signing with Google to verify user identity securely. All right, moving on to the next slide. Now let's discuss more on server foundations. I hope you all are with me. Okay, moving on. Let's get to page 2. All right, the weekly scope. We'll first discuss about the architecture of the web, demystifying how the internet fundamentally works. We'll try to break down what we know as the client server model, the request response cycle. I give us a brief understanding of what the request response cycle means regarding API, application program interface, and the HTTP protocols that govern communication. We also will be discussing about the introduction to Node.js, transitioning from theory to code. We will introduce Node.js, explain the NPM ecosystem, and write our very first native HTTP web server from scratch. HTTP HTTP stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Moving on. So looking at the client server model, we'll be using an analogy which states the restaurant analogy. So regarding the restaurant analogy, the clients, which are customers, the user's web browser, mobile app, or smart TV request information or services to use. So basically, the client or the customer requests information or services to use through a browser, mobile app, or a smart TV. So the server is the kitchen, the powerful computer sitting in a data center. This server receives the request, it processes it, authenticates the request, and prepares the data for response. So the API is known as the waiter. So the API known as the waiter, I believe no API stands for application programming interface. So this interface that takes the specific order from the client and delivers it to the server, then brings the response back. So the database is the ingredient rooms where the permanent information is stored securely until the server needs it. And I believe we understand database is also known as storage area. So this is where the permanent information that the client requests or sends is stored securely until either the server needs it or the client requests for it. I hope you all are listening. Okay, moving on. We have the request response cycle. The request response cycle is simply the communication on the web and is strictly a two-way street using HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. The request client to server contains three key elements: endpoint or URL, where to go, examples, the users, method, what to do, example, get, headers or body, hidden context or submitted data. While the response is from the server to the client, request is from the client to server, while the response is from the server to the client. The response contains two key elements: status code, was it successful? We have example of this type of error codes. I believe we are used with error 404, not found. And we have the payload, the actual data requested, usually formatted as JSON file. So the request contains three key elements: endpoints or URL, method, headers or body, while the response contains just two key elements: status code and payload. HTTP methods, hypertext transfer protocol methods, the verbs of the web. When an API is built properly, it follows REST principles. REST stands for representational state transfer. principles. This maps network requests directly to the database actions. CRUD. CRUD is the short form. CRUD is an acronym for the four basic operations required to manage persistent data in a software application or database. C stands for create, R stands for read, U stands for update, and D stands for delete. I repeat, this maps network requests directly to database actions using the CRUD principle. So CRUD is an acronym for the four basic operations required to manage persistent data in a software application or database. C stands for create, R stands for read, U stands for update, and D stands for delete. Every data-driven system, from social media platforms to enterprise databases, operates on these four fundamental actions. Get, which we know as read, the R part of CRUD. Get, it retrieves data. Example, load my Instagram feed or load my Facebook post or load my TikTok page, something like that. Post stands for create in the CRUD actions. It submits new data. Example, you upload a new photo, you upload a new document, etc. Put or patch. Put or patch stands for update, modifies existing data. For example, change my bio, change my profile picture, change my password, etc. Delete or destroy, the D part, removes data entirely. For example, delete a comment, delete a post, etc. Now let's discuss on Node.js. What is Node.js? Historically, JavaScript could only run inside a web browser to make button clicks and menus open. It was entirely a front-end language. Now we have a game changer, Node.js. Node.js is a runtime environment built on Google Chrome's V8 engine, version 8 engine. It broke JavaScript out of the browser and allowed it to run directly on computer servers, interacting with files, networks, and databases. Why we use it? It is an asynchronous and non it is asynchronous and non-blocking, meaning it can handle thousands and thousands of simultaneous users without crashing. So that's the game changer behind it. That's the advantage it has. That's the advantage Node.js has over JavaScript. It is asynchronous and non-blocking, meaning it can handle thousands, millions of submitted, thousands and millions of simultaneous users without crashing. Node.js. The NPM ecosystem. So now let's understand what NPM is. NPM stands for Node Package Manager. Backend development rarely involves reinventing the wheel. An ecosystem is a community of interacting components that function together as a unified network. So backend development really involves reinventing the wheel. Node Package Manager, the world's largest software registry system. It allows one to download pre-written code packages like security libraries or database connectors directly into your project. Package.js .json file. This this is an extension. .json is an extension. So package.json, the ID card of your backend, it lists all the external packages your app depends on to run. We have call terminal commands regarding the npm ecosystem. So these commands will work on the terminal of whatever IDE you are using, your integrated development environment. It's either you are using VS Code or anti-gravity. So whatever IDE you are using, you can paste these codes in your terminal to understand how npm works. So we have the npm init-y. This creates the package.json file. npm install whatever package you want to install. You can use this npm install command to download the package or a tool. Writing your first server. Node.js comes with built-in modules. It's a library on its own. Node.js is already a written code built in modules. So let's use the HTTP module to spin up a native web server. This is a code. These are series of code you can actually write to build up a web server in your terminal. So you request for HTTP service first, then you create your server or application using the .json extension. Then you allow your server to send a message like hello mx academy. So your server prompts a message hello academy. So after it prompts a message, the server listens for the response from the client, and it runs on whatever port. You can have port 3000, port 5000. So this is an HTTP module to spin up a native web server. So now let's have a scenario, a thinking scenario. Think first, architecture case study. So the scenario is that you are hired to build the backend for a new e-commerce app. The mobile developer needs you to create two specific API interactions. First API interaction is to fetch a list of all available sneakers. Sneakers is the product. The second API interaction is to allow a user to add a new sneaker to their shopping cart. So the prompt you are going to focus on is to identify the exact HTTP methods you use for each interaction, both interaction 1 and 2. So you need to identify the exact HTTP methods you use. Next, what format will the response payload likely be sent in? This response payload deals mostly with when you allow the client to add a new sneaker to their shopping cart. So what will be the response payload like? What will the response payload be like after clicking add this Adidas sneakers to my shopping cart? Will it be added or will an error be prompted? So that is the scenario you can like observe on. So I'll give us a moment to imagine what type of prompt you use for this scenario. No, a scenario is different from a class task or classwork. You're just imagine this, just understand, just an understanding of all what we have discussed in class. So you are not meant to submit anything. So just imagine being you, you are hired to build the backend for a new e-commerce app, whatever. So the e-commerce app will mostly be selling or producing sneakers. So the mobile developer has done most of the interface job. Now you just need to do the back end of that e-commerce app, all the clicks and the response. That's the back end, all the storage, the back engine. So the mobile developer needs you to create two specific API interactions. So we just listed only two specific API interactions. So first, you fetch a list of all available sneakers, which the client can actually scroll and view the sneakers available. And two, you allow a user to add a new sneaker to their shopping cart. All right. I believe I believe you understand the scenario. All right, you can take your time. You can take your time. Okay. So let's wrap up this week one session. So the summary regarding this week one session where we discuss about server foundations. Now you understand the fundamental language of the web, which is the HTTP, and HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and the architectural divide between the client and the server. Clients are the customer. We relate client as the customers, while the server is the kitchen. So the API is the waiter. It takes whatever the customer wants to buy or request for, then takes it to the server so the server can prepare a response, send it back through the waiter to the client or customer. So you have also seen how Node.js allows us to control the server using an advanced form of JavaScript. So let's take a recap on what backend development refers to. So backend development refers to the server-side logic, database operations, and architecture that powers an application behind the scene, while the front end handles what users sees and interact with. The back end manages business logic, data storage, user authentication, and system security. Core components of backend architecture includes the servers. So, you know, server is what we are based on today, is what this session is about. The week one session is about server. So servers are machines or cloud environments. Examples of cloud environments, we have AWS, familiar with AWS, Amazon Web Service, and we have the Microsoft Azure. The Azure is spelled as Azure. This hosts the application code on the cloud. So database is also a component of backend architecture. Database storage engines like PostgreSQL, MongoDB. We'll be talking about MongoDB later in this backend development class. It's also an important aspect in either week 2 or week 3 class. Or SQL Server. SQL stands for Structured Query Language. And these languages that persist and query data. An API, which stands for Application Programming Interface, is a set of rules and protocols that allows two different software systems to communicate with each other. These are the rules and regulations which must be followed for the communication between two or more computer systems or mobile systems. It acts as an intermediary messenger. That's why we gave the example of a waiter in our. So it acts as an intermediary messenger that takes a request from a client, takes it to the server, tells the server what to do, server provides a response, and the API delivers the response back to the client. That is what the cycle, the request response cycle behind the API. So the week one assignment. Hello server. So now you install node.js on your local machine. You can search this on can search for it on Google. I think let me just show you what the node.js looks like. So I'll share my screen a bit. So you search for it and you install it. So when you search for Node.js, you get a Windows installer package. Then you install it on your system. Okay, let me share. Let me stop broadcasting then I share my screen so you can see. All right, I believe you can see my screen. So once you like search for Node.js on Google, you get this Windows installer package, this setup file, this node. This might be because it's been long I've downloaded this one. Might be a less version or like the one you might have out now. So let me show you what it looks like. This is the Node.js Foundation, Node.js Foundation, product version 20.17.0, about 8.3 MB. So after installing Node.js on your local machine, then you create a new folder and initialize it using npm init-y. So this new folder you'll be creating, this one will be done on your IDE, your integrated development environment. So it might either be your Visual Studio Code, VS Code, or your anti-gravity. So whatever IDE you are using, you create a new folder under your IDE, then initialize Node.js using the code or terminal command npm init-y. So next you write a native server.js file that listens on port 5000. I told you also that you also have another port. The example port I used earlier was port 3000. So now what you have to do is to write a native server.js file that listens on port 5000. Configure it so that when you visit the localhost 5000 link, HTTP localhost 5000 in your browser, it returns a JSON response containing your name and your favorite coding language. I believe this is very easy. It's just too easy since it's the week one assignment. So for week one, you create your first server, Hello server, that listens on port 5000. All right. So I believe we got the summary regarding the week one server foundation. So please let me know if there's any question. You can send in your question in the chat box. If there are no questions, also we are satisfied. Please let me know in the chat box. So you can stop the recording and get you get a YouTube recorded link for this class. So for those that didn't turn up on time, the video is recorded. Yes, the video is recorded. So you get the YouTube recorded link on your group chat. So if there are no further questions, the CEO sends his regards. So please let me know if I can end the call now. Or you can if there are no questions to ask, you can leave the call so I can end the call. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Please ensure you do your assignments because you get